The country was in a public health crisis, not from a new threat like COVID, but from a very old killer of kids that had once been nearly eradicated, measles.
This is the biggest increase in deaths we've seen since records began. The figure of 32 dead is up from 25 only yesterday.
These hospitals aren't designed to deal with this, and I think the minute you're getting hospitals running at 200 and 300% capacity, I think that speaks for itself. It's incredibly serious.
The government of Samoa declared a measles epidemic in October of 2019. Most of the victims were children. In one family, 2 sisters and a brother were killed by the disease. The oldest was just 3. In another family, 2 sisters-in-law both lost sons, aged 14 months and 6 months, who died just 2 days apart. The mother of the oldest told the UK's Telegraph newspaper, "I saw him every day on the life support machine and I saw him deteriorating. It's very hard to accept and to see my child suffer like that." By December, almost 4,000 cases had been reported in a country of 200,000, roughly the same population as Des Moines, Iowa. And 55 people, mostly children under the age of 4, had died. The tiny nation imposed a 2-day national lockdown. Citizens were stuck in their homes to stop the spread. Government volunteers fanned out to help families in need. Anyone in distress was instructed to fly a red banner from their house. The banners were everywhere. As some overseas charities began shipping children's coffins, over to Samoa to cover for a local shortage. An international health effort was underway. The Samoan government even asked the US CDC for help. By the time the Samoan government declared an end to the epidemic, 83 people had died. Again, most of them kids. Now remember, we're talking about measles here, a disease that was almost eliminated worldwide thanks to safe, effective and cheap vaccines. In fact, in 2013, 92% of infants in Samoa were receiving the measles, mumps, rubella, or MMR vaccine around the time they turned a year old. In 2017, though, that was down to 67%. And in the one-year period from 2017 to 2018, it dropped down to about 40%. As the New York Times put it, Samoa was suddenly on a par with some of the poorest countries in Africa. What happened to send the rate so low in 2018 specifically? Well, a growing anti-vaccine movement found a story to rally around. That year, 2 infants died after getting the vaccine. They died because their nurses had made a fatal mistake in administering the shots. They mixed a muscle relaxant into the vaccines instead of sterile water. Those nurses quickly confessed their error and pled guilty to manslaughter.
So let me just pause there to point out, this is what actually happened, right? So it was human error from the nurses that mixed a muscle relaxant with the vaccine instead of sterile water. That led to the deaths of 2 people, 2 kids. In step RFK to use this story to drive home his anti-vaccine bullshit.
But those facts did not matter to Samoan anti-vaxxers. Instead of telling the truth, they claimed that the vaccine itself was responsible for the deaths. And they got help from a US-based anti-vax group, Children's Health Defense, which took to Facebook to question the safety of the vaccines that those infants received. But again, it wasn't the vaccine. And there was no correction from that US group. In the wake of those 2 deaths, Samoa's prime minister gave in to the anti-vaxxers and halted the country's measles vaccination drive in 2018 and continued the pause for nearly a year, even after the people of Samoa learned that the nurses and not the vaccine were the reason for those 2 children dying. Samoan health experts urged the government to resume mass vaccination, but they didn't do so until well into the outbreak. The founder of Children's Health Defense, a prominent American anti-vax activist, would later tell a Samoan newspaper that he had the prime minister's ear on the issue, and that the island nation's leader had privately shared his doubts about the safety of immunizing the public. That activist, quote-unquote, had become something of a celebrity in Samoa. He was honored as a guest of the prime minister. He met with local anti-vax activists. Who was this American anti-vaxxer who bragged after the epidemic about his sway with the Samoan leader? Actually, he's the reason why I'm telling you all this.
When I am the President of the United States, I am going to end the chronic disease epidemic in this country. ADD, ADHD, speech delay, language delay, tics, Tourette syndrome, ASD, and autism. This is crippling to the middle class in this country, and we need to figure out what it is.
Yes, that's Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's running against Joe Biden for the Democratic presidential nomination.
This is a video from when he was running as a Democrat.
RFK Jr., who heads the anti-vax Children's Health Defense Network, which has since been banned from Facebook and Instagram for spreading misinformation. RFK Jr., who in June 2019, along with his wife, actress Cheryl Hines, was a special guest of the Samoan Prime Minister at the country's Independence Day celebration. While on that trip, Kennedy also just happened to meet with one of Samoa's most prominent anti-vaxxers, and she posted a pic of them together on Instagram, along with the hashtag investigate before you vaccinate. It's on that trip that Kennedy would later brag where he spent extensive time with the Samoan leader. Quote, "The Prime Minister was a joy to be with. He spent a lot of time with us. We met many health officials."
So are you understanding what happened here? There was a mistake from nurses where they mixed muscle relaxant with vaccines, killed 2 kids. And we know that's what happened. But RFK and his group used this to pounce on vaccines and claim vaccines are the problem, and the vaccines led to the deaths. Not the human error and the muscle relaxant, the vaccines led to the deaths. So he goes in there and he imposes on these people, convinces the government there, hey, Enough with the vaccines. The fallout was that giant measles outbreak where 83 people died.
He told reporters he and the Prime Minister only talked a limited amount about vaccines and mostly discussed whether his charity, the Children's Health Defence, could help improve Samoa's health system. Weeks later, the epidemic of the unvaccinated was underway in Samoa. And as more children died that November, Kennedy sent the Samoan Prime Minister a letter pressing him to investigate whether those children died not of measles, but ridiculously of exposure to the measles vaccine. Quote, children who received the live measles virus during Samoa's recent vaccination drive may have shed the virus and inadvertently infected vulnerable children. He added, it is a regrettable possibility that these children are causalities of Merck's vaccine. He probably meant casualties. Either way, he didn't know what he was talking about. Remember, Kennedy is an environmental lawyer with zero qualifications to talk about vaccines or healthcare of any kind. Actual physicians with actual experience have been quick to debunk RFK's letter, pointing out that there's no evidence for his claim that vaccinated kids shed the measles virus, and noting that even if they had, it couldn't cause an outbreak. It was just as false as those posts by RFK's nonprofit suggesting those two Samoan infants, those two children, had died from the vaccine in 2018, posts that were never retracted or corrected. In fact, we reached out to Kennedy's presidential campaign for comment this week on his vaccine misinformation in Samoa, and they doubled down.
This is something we've seen with RFK, right? When he's pressed, he was pressed on CNN one time where he says, hey, you said, quote, there is no vaccine that's safe and effective. And he's like, I didn't say that. And then they're like, okay, cut to the tape. And he said exactly that. What he'll do is he'll change his position based on who's pressing him and what the vibe of the room is. And he'll say, no, I'm not anti-vaccine. I just want safe and effective vaccines. I want us to study and make sure all the vaccines are okay. But in reality, there's countless clips of him saying there is no such thing as a safe and effective vaccine. So, I mean, the real question to ask him is, of the vaccines that are on the market right now, how many would remain as is? And that's a question he would struggle with because he wants to get rid of all of them. Get rid of all of them. That's what he wants to do. He's responsible for these 83 deaths. His vaccine misinformation, his connection with the Samoan government, his convincing of them. But I'm not done. So again, here's a tweet of Elon Musk, quote tweeting Donald Trump, talking about head of HHS for RFK. Elon Musk says, congratulations. RFK Jr. thinks Wi-Fi causes cancer, doesn't believe in AIDS, more on that in a minute, thinks COVID was created by Jews and Chinese and it didn't infect them, thinks fluoride makes kids trans, is against all vaccines, contributed to the measles death of 83 people, mostly kids, and committed sexual assault. Now you might be thinking, well, come on, man. If he was an AIDS denier, that'd be like the heart of the conversation, right? Not just the anti-vaccine stuff, right? All right, well, there's multiple instances of this. There's a whole chapter in his book on Fauci where he denies AIDS. A whole chapter. And here's a clip of him talking about exactly this. Here we go.
And his belief was that the HIV epidemic was not being or the AIDS epidemic was not being caused by HIV. It was being caused by toxics, particularly toxics that gay men were exposing themselves to in this kind of party lifestyle.
So he's talking about some other crank who argued, no, HIV doesn't lead to AIDS. It's the gay lifestyle. It's all the partying. It's the poppers, etc.
And particularly amyl nitrate or poppers were probably the most clear culprit in the epidemic of Kaposi sarcoma, which was the first signal of the AIDS issue. And I don't know whether you have he believes that HIV does not cause AIDS, that it's all caused by toxics. And I don't know if you adopt that kind of orthodoxy, but I'd love to hear your opinions on that. But also, I know that's consistent with a lot of things that you talk about, that the real problem is offensive insults in the environment that are empowering viruses to do damage to us that normally would be benign.
That is totally does not understand how viruses work. That's completely clueless. It's basically the idea like, bro, if you're healthy and you take care of your body and like everything around you is clean, viruses won't even affect you like that, bro.
If we had a healthy ecosystem inside and outside, polio wouldn't exist and HIV wouldn't exist and TB and all of these other that have these kind of environmental connections.
Insane. That is absolutely insane. That is not how viruses work at all. What the fuck? I got this for you too. Ready? In his Fauci book, RFK reveals himself to be an AIDS conspiracist too. He repeatedly quotes AIDS activist Christine Maggiore, never mentioning that she was HIV positive, believed